The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Lily Lawson pulled her dusty blue sedan into the parking lot of the Pine Creek Diner. She had been back in town for exactly 3 days after nearly 10 years away, and already the slow pace of small-town life was making her skin itch. The familiar bell jingled as she pushed open the diner door, and the conversations hushed for just a moment too long before resuming. That was the thing about Pine Creek. Everyone noticed everything. "Well, look who's back from the big city," called out Dot, the 60-something waitress who had been serving coffee and gossip at the diner since before Lily was born. "Your daddy told us you might be staying a while this time." Lily forced a smile as she slid onto a stool at the counter. "Just until I figure out my next move," she said, accepting the steaming mug Dot placed in front of her without asking. "Dad's getting older. Thought I should check in on him." What she didn't say was that her investigative journalism career had hit a wall after her last story fell apart, leaving her reputation in tatters and her bank account empty. Coming home to her father's house wasn't a choice so much as her only option. "Your daddy's tough as nails," Dot said with a snort. "Been sheriff of this county for 25 years and hasn't slowed down a bit, though these car break-ins have been giving him fits." Lily's journalistic instincts perked up despite herself. "Car break-ins? Started about a month ago. Seems like every few days somebody's car gets hit. Nothing too valuable taken most times, but windows smashed, dashboards torn up. Sheriff's been working overtime trying to catch whoever's doing it." Lily sipped her coffee, wondering if her father had mentioned any of this during their awkward dinners together. But they had carefully avoided talking about his work or her failed career, sticking to safe topics like the weather and Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning tomatoes. After finishing her breakfast, Lily left a tip on the counter and headed back to her car. The day had warmed considerably, and she rolled down her window to enjoy the fresh spring air as she fumbled for her keys. That's when she noticed the glass. Tiny shards sparkled on the pavement beside her car like cruel diamonds. Her passenger window was completely shattered, the glove compartment hanging open and empty. Her heart pounded as she spun around, scanning the nearly empty parking lot, and that's when she saw him. A tall man in a dark coat walking quickly away from the diner, head down. Without thinking, Lily sprinted after him. "Hey!" she shouted. "Stop right there!" The man glanced back, startled, then quickened his pace. "I said stop!" Lily's voice carried across the town square, causing several people to turn and stare. The man in the coat finally halted near the old courthouse, turning to face her with an expression of confusion. Up close, he was younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with serious eyes and the kind of suit that cost more than her monthly rent in the city. He didn't look like her idea of a small-town thief, but Lily had learned through bitter experience that appearances meant nothing. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his voice calm but with an edge of authority that caught her off guard. "You can explain why you broke into my car," Lily said, trying to control her breathing. The chase had left her winded, but the adrenaline kept her anger sharp. The man's eyebrows rose. "I beg your pardon?" "My car," Lily repeated, pointing back toward the diner. "Blue sedan, window smashed in, glove box emptied, and here you are, hurrying away from the scene." "I assure you I had nothing to do with that," the man said, straightening his shoulders slightly. "I was just leaving the real estate office." He nodded toward a storefront behind them. "I'm new in town, looking for a place to rent." "Convenient," Lily scoffed. By now, a small crowd had gathered, whispering and watching. Small-town entertainment at its finest. "What's your name?" The man hesitated before answering. "Daniel Reeves." "Well, Daniel Reeves, I'm Lily Lawson, and—" "The sheriff's daughter," someone in the crowd murmured, and Lily felt a flash of irritation. Even after all these years away, she was still defined by her father's position. "That's right," she said, seizing the momentary advantage. "And I'm making a citizen's arrest until my father gets here." Daniel Reeves looked more annoyed than worried. "This is ridiculous. I've been in meetings all morning. I didn't break into anyone's car." "Then you won't mind waiting until the sheriff arrives to sort this out," Lily insisted, crossing her arms. She knew she might be overreacting, but the violation of her personal space combined with the frustrations of being back in Pine Creek had created a perfect storm of anger that needed somewhere to land. It took less than 10 minutes for Sheriff Robert Lawson's patrol car to pull up to the edge of the town square. The sheriff himself stepped out, his weathered face creased with concern as he took in the scene. At 62, he still cut an imposing figure in his uniform, though the hair beneath his hat had gone completely silver. "What's going on here, Lily?" he asked as he approached, nodding politely to the bystanders who began to disperse under his gaze. "Someone broke into my car at the diner," she explained. "Window smashed, glove compartment ransacked, and I caught this man hurrying away from the scene." Sheriff Lawson turned his attention to Daniel, who met his gaze steadily. "Sir?" "Daniel Reeves," he introduced himself, offering his hand. "I just arrived in Pine Creek yesterday. I was at Morrison Real Estate this morning looking at rental properties when this young woman chased me down and accused me of vandalism." The sheriff shook his hand, studying him carefully. "Any identification, Mr. Reeves?" Daniel reached slowly into his jacket and produced a wallet, handing over his driver's license. Sheriff Lawson examined it, then returned it with a nod. "Dad," Lily interjected, "my car was just broken into and he was the only person leaving the area." "That doesn't make him guilty, Lily," her father said quietly. "We need evidence." "Check his pockets," she insisted. "Maybe he still has whatever he took." Daniel Reeves looked incredulous. "I didn't take anything because I didn't break into any car. I'm happy to cooperate with your investigation, Sheriff, but this is bordering on harassment." Sheriff Lawson sighed, clearly torn between his daughter's certainty and proper procedure. "Mr. Reeves, would you mind if I took a look at your car and got some contact information from you? Just routine for our investigation." "Of course," Daniel agreed, though his jaw tightened slightly. "My rental car is parked outside the Pinewood Inn where I'm staying until I find more permanent accommodations." "Dad, you're just going to let him go?" Lily asked, disbelief coloring her voice. "I'm going to investigate properly," Sheriff Lawson corrected her, "like I've been doing for 25 years. The subtle rebuke stung, and Lily felt her cheeks grow warm. She watched as her father took down Daniel's information in his small notebook, speaking to him in low tones she couldn't quite catch. After a few minutes, the sheriff turned back to her. "I'll need to take a report about your car. Mr. Reeves will be around if we need to speak with him further." Daniel Reeves straightened his tie and gave Lily a look that wasn't exactly angry, but wasn't forgiving either. "Ms. Lawson, I understand your frustration at having your property violated, but in the future perhaps gather facts before making public accusations." With that, he turned and walked away, his expensive shoes clicking on the sidewalk. "You're just letting him walk away?" Lily asked her father once Daniel was out of earshot. Sheriff Lawson pocketed his notebook. "Lily, we've had a string of break-ins. Each one follows the same pattern, and they started weeks before Mr. Reeves ever set foot in Pine Creek. Now let's go look at your car." As they walked back toward the diner, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she'd missed something important about the stranger in the nice suit. There was something in his bearing, in the careful way he chose his words, that didn't fit with the usual visitors to their small town. What she didn't know, what neither of the Lawsons knew, was that Daniel Reeves had arrived in Pine Creek early for a reason. The state attorney general's office had kept his appointment quiet until the official announcement next week. Daniel had wanted time to get a feel for the community he would be serving as the new state prosecutor, to understand its rhythms and challenges before his position became public knowledge. And in less than 15 minutes, the sheriff's headstrong daughter had given him a crash course in small-town justice that no amount of preparation could have provided. Lily Lawson couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan in her childhood bedroom spun lazily above her, its familiar creak a soundtrack to her racing thoughts. 2 days had passed since the incident with Daniel Reeves, and her embarrassment had hardened into something else: determination. The insurance adjuster had come and gone, leaving her with a patched-up car window and a nagging suspicion that she wasn't wrong about the well-dressed stranger. Her father might be content to let the investigation crawl along at the usual Pine Creek pace, but Lily still had the instincts that had once made her a promising investigative journalist. By morning, she had a plan. If Daniel Reeves was innocent, she'd prove it, and if he wasn't, she'd catch him red-handed. Going somewhere? Sheriff Lawson asked as Lily grabbed her car keys from the hook by the door. He sat at the kitchen table, nursing his second cup of coffee while flipping through case files. Just into town, she replied, trying to sound casual. Thought I'd pick up some groceries. Her father looked up, his eyes tired but still sharp. Lily, about what happened the other day. I know. I jumped to conclusions, she said. Quickly. I'm not going to bother your Mr. Reeves if that's what you're worried about. The sheriff sighed. That's not... Look, this town has changed since you left. We've got problems we never had before. These break-ins are just symptoms of something bigger. For a brief moment, Lily saw not the stern sheriff but her dad, worried, aging, carrying burdens she knew nothing about. She almost sat down, almost asked him to explain, but old habits died hard. I'll be back for dinner, she said instead, and slipped out the door. The Pinewood Inn sat on the edge of town, a 2-story brick building that had been serving travelers since the 1950s. Lily parked across the street at the gas station and waited. If Daniel Reeves was staying here, she'd eventually catch sight of him. She didn't have to wait long. At precisely 8:30, he emerged from the inn's front door, dressed in another expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He walked to a sleek, black rental car, placed his briefcase carefully in the passenger seat, and drove toward downtown. Lily followed at a distance, surprised when he parked outside the county courthouse. She watched as he climbed the steps and disappeared inside. Curious, she waited 15 minutes before following. The courthouse was quiet, most of the morning cases already heard. Lily nodded to Mrs. Patterson, the ancient clerk who had known her since childhood. Looking for your dad? Mrs. Patterson asked. He's not in today. Actually, I was wondering if you could help me with something else, Lily said, leaning casually against the counter. There's a new guy in town. Tall, dark hair, nice suits, drives a black car. Name's Daniel Reeves. Any idea what business he might have here? Mrs. Patterson's expression remained neutral, but her eyes flickered briefly toward the hallway leading to the district attorney's offices. Can't say that I do, she replied, shuffling some papers. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got filing to do. Interesting, Lily thought as she left the courthouse. Very interesting. Her next stop was the local library, where she used the public computer to search for information about Daniel Reeves. There wasn't much. A few mentions in legal journals, a blurry photo from a bar association meeting. Nothing suspicious, but nothing that explained his presence in Pine Creek either. By lunchtime, Lily had followed Daniel to the real estate office, a local coffee shop, and finally to the small park in the center of town, where he sat on a bench, reading through papers from his briefcase. She snapped a few photos with her phone from behind a nearby tree, feeling slightly ridiculous but unwilling to give up. Spying on people is generally frowned upon in polite society, a voice said from behind her. Lily nearly dropped her phone as she spun around. Officer Pete Wilson, her father's youngest deputy and her former high school classmate, stood watching her with an amused expression. I'm not spying, she protested. I'm observing. Pete laughed. Right. And does the subject of your observation know he's being photographed? Lily pocketed her phone, her cheeks burning. I'm just trying to figure out what he's doing here. Dad won't tell me anything about the investigation. Maybe because there's nothing to tell about Mr. Reeves, Pete suggested. Sheriff ran his information, he's clean. Then why all the secrecy? Why is he meeting with people at the courthouse? Why won't Mrs. Patterson talk about him? Pete shrugged. Not everyone who comes to Pine Creek is up to no good, Lily. Sometimes, people just want a quiet place to start over. His words hit closer to home than Lily wanted to admit. Wasn't that why she had come back? To lick her wounds and figure out her next move? But there was something about Daniel Reeves that didn't add up, and her journalistic instincts wouldn't let her drop it. Just be careful, Pete added, more seriously. Your dad's got enough to worry about without you stirring up trouble. After Pete left, Lily decided to take a more direct approach. She walked straight to Daniel's bench and sat down beside him. He looked up, surprised, then wary when he recognized her. "Ms. Lawson," he said, closing his folder. "Come to accuse me of more crimes?" "Actually, I came to apologize," Lily lied smoothly. "I was upset about my car and I overreacted. I'm sorry." Daniel studied her face, clearly not convinced. "Apology accepted," he said finally. "Though I have to wonder why you've been following me all morning if you're feeling so remorseful." Lily felt her face grow warm. "You noticed that, huh?" "I was a public defender in Boston for 6 years before going into private practice," he replied. "I developed a certain awareness of my surroundings." "Boston?" Lily perked up. "That's where I was living before I came back here." A flicker of interest crossed Daniel's face before he masked it. "Small world," he said, gathering his papers. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have appointments to keep." "What kind of appointments does a private lawyer from Boston have in Pine Creek?" Lily pressed. "We're not exactly a hotbed of legal activity." Daniel stood, tucking his briefcase under his arm. "Everyone has their reasons for coming to a place like this, Ms. Lawson. I suspect yours are just as complicated as mine." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted across the park. A shopkeeper burst out of the hardware store, shouting and pointing at a teenage boy who was sprinting away with something clutched in his hand. "Stop! Thief!" the shopkeeper yelled. Without hesitation, Daniel dropped his briefcase and took off after the boy, his long legs eating up the distance between them. Lily, caught off guard, scrambled to follow. The chase led them down a narrow alley between buildings. The boy, realizing he was cornered, turned to face them, wild-eyed and breathing hard. He couldn't have been more than 16, wearing a threadbare hoodie and jeans with holes in the knees. "Easy now," Daniel said, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "Whatever you took, it's not worth the trouble you're in." "Back off, man," the kid warned, pulling something from his pocket that glinted in the sunlight. Lily's breath caught. A knife. The boy was holding a knife. Daniel didn't flinch. "You don't want to add assault to shoplifting," he said calmly. "That's the difference between community service and juvenile detention." The boy's hand trembled. "You don't know nothing about me." "I know you're scared," Daniel replied. "I know you think you don't have options. But this isn't the way to solve whatever problem you're facing." Lily watched, fascinated, as Daniel talked to the boy like he'd done this 100 times before. There was no fear in his voice, just steady reason and an unexpected compassion. After what seemed like forever, the boy lowered the knife. Daniel stepped forward and carefully took it from him, then placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him back toward the main street. By the time they returned to the park, Sheriff Lawson had arrived, alerted by calls from witnesses. He took in the scene, Daniel still holding the boy's shoulder, Lily trailing behind them, the shopkeeper waiting with his arms crossed. "What happened here?" the sheriff demanded. "Just a misunderstanding," Daniel said before anyone else could speak. "This young man made a poor choice, but he's ready to make it right, aren't you?" The boy nodded sullenly, pulling a small package from his hoodie pocket and handing it to the shopkeeper. "Sorry," he mumbled. Sheriff Lawson's eyes narrowed as he looked from Daniel to the boy. "Ty Reynolds," he sighed. "This is the 3rd time this month. Your grandmother's going to be heartbroken." "If I may," Daniel interjected, "perhaps there's an alternative to pressing charges. A diversion program, maybe. Something that addresses the underlying issues." "We don't have those kinds of resources here," Sheriff Lawson replied. "Maybe you should," Daniel said quietly. Something in his tone made Lily look at him more closely. The way he carried himself, the way he spoke about legal options with such confidence. Suddenly the pieces clicked into place. "You're not just any lawyer, are you?" she asked. "You're here on official business." Daniel met her gaze steadily but said nothing. The sheriff looked between them, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning realization. "Mr. Reeves, perhaps we should continue this conversation at my office." As her father led both Daniel and the teenage thief away, Lily stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing. She had been tracking Daniel Reeves all day, convinced he was hiding something shady, when in reality, The truth hit her like a punch to the stomach. The meetings at the courthouse, the careful way he avoided attention, the deference people showed him once they knew who he was. Daniel Reeves wasn't a criminal. He was someone much more dangerous to the status quo in Pine Creek, and possibly to her father's career. The sheriff's office hadn't changed since Lily was a kid. The same wood paneling lined the walls, the same ancient coffee maker gurgled in the corner, and the same bulletin board displayed wanted posters and community notices. But the atmosphere inside was anything but familiar as Lily paced the small waiting area. An hour had passed since her father had taken Daniel Reeves and the shoplifting teenager into his private office. Occasional raised voices filtered through the thin walls, though Lily couldn't make out the words. Whatever was happening in there, it wasn't a routine booking. Deputy Pete Wilson watched her from behind the front desk, his expression a mixture of amusement and concern. You know, wearing a hole in the floor isn't going to make them come out any faster. What's taking so long? Lily demanded. If Dad's just filing charges against the kid, it shouldn't take an hour. Pete shrugged. Not my place to say. But you know something, Lily pressed, leaning across the desk. Come on, Pete. We've known each other since we were 10. What's really going on with Daniel Reeves? Before Pete could answer, the door to the sheriff's office swung open. The teenage boy, Ty, emerged first, looking shell-shocked but not handcuffed. Sheriff Lawson followed, his hand on the boy's shoulder. Pete, take Ty home to his grandmother, the sheriff instructed. Tell Mrs. Reynolds I'll be by tomorrow to discuss the community service arrangement. Community service? Lily echoed as Pete led the teenager out. Not juvenile detention? Her father gave her a weary look. Not this time. Daniel Reeves appeared in the doorway behind him, his suit jacket draped over his arm. Tie loosened. He looked tired but satisfied, like a man who had won an important argument. Ms. Lawson, he acknowledged with a nod. Still investigating? Before Lily could respond, her father cut in. Lily, Mr. Reeves and I have some more business to discuss. Why don't you head home? I'll fill you in later. Actually, Daniel said, checking his watch, I think we've covered enough ground for today, Sheriff, and I could use some dinner. Perhaps Ms. Lawson would join me. I believe I owe her an explanation. Sheriff Lawson frowned. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Dad, Lily said firmly, I'm 30 years old. I can have dinner with whoever I want. The sheriff looked between them, then sighed in defeat. Fine, but this stays between us until the official announcement, understood? Daniel nodded solemnly. You have my word. 20 minutes later, Lily found herself sitting across from Daniel Reeves in a corner booth at the Pine Creek Steakhouse, the only restaurant in town that could be considered upscale. A candle flickered between them, casting shadows across Daniel's serious face. So, Lily said, after they'd ordered, are you going to tell me who you really are? Or do I have to guess? Daniel studied her for a moment, then smiled slightly. You're a lot like your father, you know, persistent. I'll take that as a compliment, Lily said, though she wasn't entirely sure it was meant as one. It was, he assured her. Sheriff Lawson is a complicated man, but he's dedicated to this community. Lily felt a flicker of defensiveness. If you're about to criticize how he does his job, I'm not, Daniel interrupted. At least not entirely. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. What I'm about to tell you doesn't become public knowledge until next week, so I need your discretion. Lily nodded, her journalistic instincts on high alert. My full title, Daniel said, is State Prosecutor Daniel Reeves. I've been appointed to oversee legal proceedings in this district, which includes Pine Creek and 7 other small towns. The revelation hit Lily like a thunderbolt. You're the new state prosecutor? And you didn't think to mention this when I accused you of breaking into my car? Would you have believed me? Daniel asked reasonably. A stranger claiming to be a high-ranking legal official with no proof to offer? Besides, I wanted to maintain my anonymity a bit longer. Why? Daniel swirled the water in his glass, considering his words carefully. When you parachute into a new position, everyone puts on their best behavior. You never see the reality of how things function. I wanted to understand this community before my position became known, to see how justice really works here, not just how people would present it to the new state prosecutor. Their food arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. Lily took a bite of her steak, barely tasting it as her mind raced through the implications. So that's why you were meeting people at the courthouse, she said finally. Setting up your new office. Daniel nodded. Discreetly, the formal announcement comes Monday. And that's why you stepped in with Ty today. You were testing how my father handles juvenile cases. A flash of admiration crossed Daniel's face. You are good, yes, I was curious. Small towns often lack the resources for proper youth intervention programs. When I saw an opportunity to observe firsthand, I took it. And what did you conclude about my father's methods? Lily asked, her voice carefully neutral. Daniel set down his fork. Your father is fair-minded but overworked. He's running a department with half the resources it needs in a community facing growing problems. That's partly why I accepted this position. Rural justice needs attention just as much as big city courts. Lily relaxed slightly, relieved that Daniel wasn't planning to target her father. But something still bothered her. Why are you telling me all this? Why trust me with information that's supposed to be confidential for another week? Daniel's expression turned serious. Because I think you can help me. Your father mentioned you were an investigative journalist. He's quite proud of your work despite your recent setbacks. Lily flinched. So her father had been talking about her. Ex-journalist, she corrected. My last big story fell apart spectacularly. Everyone makes mistakes, Daniel said. What matters is what you do next. Before Lily could respond, the restaurant door burst open. Deputy Pete Wilson rushed in, scanning the room until he spotted them. Lily, he called, hurrying to their table. Your dad's been trying to reach you. Your phone off? Lily pulled her phone from her pocket and saw 3 missed calls. What's wrong? Pete's face was grim. There's been another break-in. But this time, they took your dad's service weapon from his patrol car. Lily stood so quickly she knocked her water glass over. Is he okay? He's fine, but he's pretty shaken up. It happened right outside the station while he was finishing paperwork. Daniel was already placing money on the table for their unfinished meal. We should go, he said, all traces of the relaxed dinner companion gone, replaced by the authoritative prosecutor. The scene at the sheriff's station was chaotic. 2 patrol cars sat in the parking lot with their lights flashing, illuminating the broken window of her father's personal vehicle. Sheriff Lawson stood next to it, his face a mask of controlled anger as he spoke with another deputy. When he saw Lily, relief flooded his features. There you are. I was worried. Dad, what happened? Someone broke into my car while I was inside, he explained, his voice tight. Took my backup gun from the glove compartment, bold as brass, right under our noses. Any witnesses? Daniel asked, his prosecutor's mind already at work. Mrs. Harmon from the bakery saw someone running away, but it was too dark to get a good description. The sheriff ran a hand through his silver hair. This is getting out of hand. First random cars, now targeting the sheriff directly. It's like they're taunting us. Or escalating, Daniel said quietly. A chill ran down Lily's spine. What had started as petty vandalism was turning into something more dangerous. Dad, you should come home. You've been working all day. Sheriff Lawson shook his head. I need to coordinate the search. That gun can't stay on the streets. Robert, Daniel said, using the sheriff's first name with natural authority. Your daughter's right. You've got good deputies who can handle the search tonight. Fresh eyes in the morning will serve everyone better. To Lily's surprise, her father didn't argue. He simply nodded, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. Pete, he called, you're in charge till morning. Keep me updated on any developments. As they walked to Lily's car, she noticed Daniel hanging back. Aren't you coming? She asked. I should stay and help, he said. My experience might be useful. There's nothing more to do tonight, Sheriff Lawson said firmly. And if you're going to be working in this district, you should know how we handle things. We take care of our own. And right now we could all use some rest. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. I'll follow you in my car. The drive to the Lawson house was silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Lily couldn't help but wonder if her very public confrontation with Daniel in the town square had somehow contributed to her father being targeted. Had she inadvertently shown a criminal that the sheriff's family was vulnerable? As they pulled into the driveway of the small house where Lily had grown up, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The back door was slightly ajar, swaying gently in the evening breeze. "Dad," she whispered, pointing. Sheriff Lawson immediately tensed, his hand moving to where his service weapon would normally be. "Stay in the car," he ordered. "Both of you." "You're unarmed," Daniel pointed out, already getting out of his own vehicle. "I'm coming with you." Lily watched as the two men approached the house cautiously. Despite her father's instructions, she couldn't just sit there. She quietly opened her car door and followed at a distance. The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence, followed by a shout from inside the house. Without thinking, Lily ran toward the back door. What she saw inside would change everything. Not just about the case of the car break-ins, but about her understanding of Pine Creek, her father's job, and the complicated web of small-town justice that Daniel Reeves had come to unravel. Lily froze in the doorway, her heart hammering against her ribs. The kitchen was a mess. Drawers pulled out, cabinets hanging open, papers scattered across the floor. But it wasn't the disarray that made her gasp. It was the sight of her father standing perfectly still, hands raised slightly, facing a young man who was pointing a gun, her father's stolen service weapon, directly at him. Daniel stood a few feet away, his body tense but his voice surprisingly calm as he spoke to the intruder. "Think about what you're doing, Ty," Daniel was saying. "This isn't just breaking and entering anymore. That's a weapon you're holding." Ty Reynolds, the same teenager from the shoplifting incident earlier that day, looked terrified, his hand shaking as he gripped the gun. His eyes darted frantically between the sheriff, Daniel, and now Lily in the doorway. "Stay back," he shouted when he spotted her. "I don't want to hurt nobody, but I will if I have to." "Lily, get out of here," Sheriff Lawson ordered, his voice steady despite the gun pointed at his chest. But Lily couldn't move. Her journalistic instincts took over, observing details even as adrenaline coursed through her veins. Ty's clothes were the same ones he'd worn earlier, but now they were dirty and torn. A bruise was forming on his cheek. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying. "Ty," she said softly, ignoring her father's warning glare. "What happened to you? After Pete took you home?" The boy's eyes flickered with surprise that she'd asked a real question instead of just telling him to put the gun down. "What do you think happened?" he spat out. "My grandma wasn't home." He was. Something in the way Ty said "he" made Lily's skin crawl. There was fear there, and hatred. "Your stepfather?" Sheriff Lawson asked quietly. Ty's hand tightened on the gun. "Don't act like you care now. I told you before. I told you what he does and you didn't do nothing." The accusation hung in the air. Lily glanced at her father, whose face had gone pale beneath his weathered tan. "You reported abuse?" Daniel asked, his prosecutor's mind clearly piecing things together. "To the sheriff's department." "3 times, Ty said, his voice cracking. "And every time, they just took me home and told him to take it easy, like that was gonna stop anything." Sheriff Lawson closed his eyes briefly. "The reports were filed. We followed protocol." "Protocol?" Ty's voice rose. "He broke my arm last year. Said I fell off my bike and everybody just believed him because he's Mr. Big Shot business owner, and I'm just some kid from the poor side of town." Lily felt sick. She'd been so focused on car break-ins that she'd missed the real crime happening. Right under everyone's nose. "That's why you were stealing," she realized aloud. "You're saving up to run away." Ty didn't confirm or deny it, but his silence was answer enough. Daniel took a careful step forward. "Ty, I believe you, and I promise you, things are going to change. But first, you need to put that gun down." "Why should I trust you?" Ty demanded. "You're just like him." He jerked his head toward Sheriff Lawson. "You'll make promises and then nothing will happen." "I'm not just a lawyer," Daniel said. I'm the new state prosecutor for this district. My job is to make sure justice is served, especially when the system fails people like you. But I can't help you if you're facing armed robbery and assault charges." Ty's eyes widened slightly, the gun wavering in his grip. "You're really the state prosecutor?" "He is," Lily confirmed. "And he's not from around here. He doesn't owe anybody any favors." Ty looked between them, indecision written across his young face. "I just needed money," he said finally, his voice small. "I was going to leave tonight. Get on a bus and never come back." "We can find another way," Daniel promised. "But this isn't it, Ty. You know that." Slowly, Ty lowered the gun. Sheriff Lawson stepped forward and carefully took it from him, immediately removing the ammunition. "I'm sorry," Ty whispered, tears streaming down his face now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "I didn't know what else to do." The sheriff looked at the boy, real regret in his eyes. "I'm the one who should be sorry, son." What happened next? Unfolded like a scene from one of the crime dramas Lily used to watch on TV. Deputy Pete arrived with backup, responding to a silent alarm that had been triggered when Ty broke in. The boy was handcuffed, but not roughly, and read his rights. Daniel spoke quietly with the deputies, ensuring that Ty would be held separately from adult offenders and that a social worker would be called immediately. Through it all, Sheriff Lawson stood silently by the kitchen table, looking at the gun he'd placed there as if it were a snake that might bite him. "Dad?" Lily touched his arm gently once the deputies had taken Ty away. "Are you okay?" He looked up at her, and for the first time in her life, Lily saw her father's certainty crumble. "I missed it," he said. "Or worse, I saw it and didn't do enough?" "Robert," Daniel said, returning from outside. "We need to talk." The three of them sat around the kitchen table, the mess of the break-in still surrounding them. None of them seemed to have the energy to clean it up just yet. "Ty's stepfather is Carlton Wheeler," Sheriff Lawson explained without being asked. "Owns the construction company that employs half the town, biggest taxpayer in the county, and a child abuser," Daniel added bluntly. The sheriff nodded, his face grim. "There were reports. 3 of them, like Ty said. Each time I went out there myself. Each time Wheeler had an explanation. Accidents, roughhousing gone wrong, Ty being clumsy. And you believed him?" Lily couldn't keep the accusation from her voice. "No," her father said sharply. "I didn't. But without evidence, without Ty being willing to speak up in front of his stepfather, without his grandmother backing his story." He spread his hands helplessly. "The system has limits. The system," Daniel said quietly. "Or the people running it." Sheriff Lawson's head snapped up. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Daniel replied, "that I've spent the last 3 days reviewing case files from your department. There's a pattern, Sheriff. Certain names never appear in the serious crime reports. Certain families get warnings while others get arrested. Wheeler's construction trucks have been photographed speeding through school zones 6 times in the last year, no tickets issued." Lily watched her father's face, expecting anger, but what she saw instead was defeat. "You don't understand what it's like," he said. "Running a department on a shoestring budget. Trying to keep order in a town where one man could destroy the economy if he pulled his business out." "I understand perfectly," Daniel countered. "Small towns all over this country face the same pressures. That's exactly why I requested this assignment. But compromising justice isn't the answer. It only leads to kids like Ty taking desperate measures." Lily thought about all the small injustices she'd seen growing up, the things she'd accepted as just the way things were in Pine Creek. The wealthy kids getting warnings for underage drinking while the poor kids got community service. The blind eye turned to certain hunting violations if the poacher had the right last name. Had her father really been part of that system all along? "What happens now?" she asked, looking between the 2 men. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Now, we do things right. Starting with a proper investigation into Carlton Wheeler, and a complete review of how juvenile cases are handled in this county. You'll destroy my career," Sheriff Lawson said, though there was no fight in his voice. "Not necessarily," Daniel replied. "You have a chance here, Robert, to help me clean things up, to show this community what real justice looks like." "And Ty?" Lily asked. "What happens to him?" "That depends partly on your father," Daniel said. "As sheriff, his recommendation carries weight." Sheriff Lawson was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands on the table. Finally, he looked up. "The boy needs help, not punishment, and he's not the only one. There are others like him that I've failed." Something shifted in that moment. Lily could feel it. The weight of years of compromise seemed to lift from her father's shoulders, replaced by a new resolve. "I want to do better," he said, looking directly at Daniel. "I want to make this right." Daniel nodded, satisfaction in his eyes. That's all I needed to hear. Later, after Daniel had left and the kitchen had been put back in order, Lily found her father sitting on the porch swing, looking out at the stars. She sat beside him, the old swing creaking beneath their weight just as it had when she was small. "I really messed up, didn't I?" he asked softly. "We all did," Lily replied. "Me most of all. I was so sure Daniel was the bad guy that I missed the real story happening right in front of me." Her father chuckled humorlessly. "Some investigative journalist. Some sheriff," she countered, but there was no bite to it. They sat in silence. For a while, the weight of the evening's revelation settling around them like a heavy blanket. "You know," Sheriff Lawson said finally, "I always thought I was protecting this town, keeping the peace. But maybe all I was doing was keeping things comfortable for the people who already had power." Lily leaned her head on her father's shoulder, the way she used to when she was a child. "It's not too late to change that." As they sat there in the quiet night, Lily realized that perhaps coming home hadn't been the setback she'd thought. Maybe it was exactly where she needed to be, not to hide from her failures, but to find a new purpose, one that might help heal not just her own wounded pride, but the broken systems that had failed people like Ty for far too long. And it had all started with her wrongly accusing a man in a nice suit of breaking into her car. 6 months could change everything. Lily Lawson knew this better than most, as she adjusted her blazer and checked her reflection one last time in the bathroom mirror of the Pine Creek Community Center. Her hair was shorter now, her posture straighter. The defeated ex-journalist who had slunk back to her hometown half a year ago felt like a different person entirely. Outside, she could hear the murmur of the crowd gathering for the town's annual Founders' Day celebration. This year's event had taken on special significance. It would be the first public appearance of the newly formed Pine Creek Youth Advocacy Program, a project that had consumed Lily's life for the past few months. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Packed house. You ready?" Lily took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be," she typed back. When she stepped into the main hall, she was momentarily overwhelmed by the turnout. Nearly everyone in town seemed to be there, from elderly Mrs. Peterson leaning on her cane, in the front row to little kids fidgeting in their Sunday best. Near the stage, her father stood in his sheriff's uniform, looking more at ease than she'd seen him in years. The past 6 months had been hard on Sheriff Robert Lawson. The investigation that followed Ty's break-in had uncovered years of selective enforcement and overlooked complaints. There had been calls for his resignation, heated town meetings, and a painful period of public reckoning. But instead of stepping down, he had done something that surprised everyone. He had owned his mistakes and committed to fixing the broken system he'd helped create. Daniel Reeves spotted her from across the room and made his way through the crowd. In his tailored suit and with his confident stride, he looked every inch the state prosecutor he was, but his smile was warm as he reached her. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," Lily admitted. "Half these people still think I'm the crazy woman who publicly accused a state official of petty theft." Daniel laughed. "And the other half know you're the journalist who exposed Carlton Wheeler's abuse and helped create the town's first youth support program. I'd say your reputation has recovered nicely." Before Lily could respond, Mayor Johnson approached the microphone on stage, calling for everyone's attention. The crowd quieted as he welcomed them to the celebration and began introducing the day's speakers. First up, I'd like to invite our state prosecutor, Daniel Reeves, to say a few words about the changes we've seen in Pine Creek over the past 6 months. Daniel squeezed Lily's arm briefly before making his way to the stage. She found herself holding her breath as he adjusted the microphone and surveyed the crowd. Thank you, Mayor Johnson. When I came to Pine Creek half a year ago, I arrived quietly. I wanted to observe this community as it really was, not as it might present itself to a state official. His eyes found Lily's in the crowd, and the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Of course, my cover was blown rather spectacularly when I was accused of breaking into someone's car. A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. Lily felt her cheeks grow warm, but she smiled back at him, able to appreciate the humor now that the sting of embarrassment had faded. That unexpected encounter, Daniel continued, led to a series of events that exposed serious problems in how justice was being administered in this town. It would have been easy to point fingers, to assign blame, and then move on. Many communities do exactly that when confronted with their failings. The room grew quiet as Daniel's tone became more serious. But Pine Creek chose a different path. Instead of denial, you chose accountability. Instead of protecting the powerful, you chose to protect the vulnerable. And no one exemplifies that transformation more than your sheriff, Robert Lawson. Lily watched her father straighten his shoulders as all eyes turned to him. Sheriff Lawson could have retired rather than face the difficult process of reform. He could have denied the problems or blamed them on budget constraints. Instead, he led the charge to create new policies that ensure equal justice for everyone in this community, regardless of their last name or their bank account. Daniel gestured for Sheriff Lawson to join him on stage. As her father climbed the steps, Lily felt a surge of pride that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. 6 months ago, she had seen him as part of the problem. Now she understood that people, even those we think we know best, could surprise you with their capacity for growth and change. Thank you, Daniel, Sheriff Lawson said as he took the microphone. But the real credit today goes to someone else, someone who reminded me what justice really means. My daughter, Lily. Lily froze as the crowd turned to look at her. This wasn't part of the plan. She was supposed to speak later after the official announcements. Lily, her father continued, has spent the last 6 months building something this town desperately needed. A program that gives our young people a voice and the support they deserve. I hope you'll all join me in welcoming her to the stage. To tell you about the Pine Creek Youth Advocacy Program. The applause that followed was warm and genuine. On shaky legs, Lily made her way to the stage, accepting a quick hug from her father before taking his place at the microphone. I didn't come back to Pine Creek to start a youth program, she began honestly. I came because my career had fallen apart, and I didn't have anywhere else to go. A few knowing chuckles from the audience gave her courage to continue. But sometimes, our greatest purpose finds us when we're not looking for it. 6 months ago, a young man named Ty Reynolds broke into my father's house with a stolen gun. The room grew silent at the mention of Ty's name. Everyone knew the story by now. How Carlton Wheeler had been arrested for child abuse. How several other families had come forward with similar stories once the initial case made the news. Ty was desperate, Lily continued. He'd tried to get help through the proper channels, but the system failed him. He didn't see any other options. She paused, letting her gaze move across the familiar faces in the crowd. There are more kids like Ty in our community than we want to admit. Young people who don't trust adults to protect them, who don't believe the system works for them. The Youth Advocacy Program aims to change that. For the next few minutes, Lily outlined the program they'd created. A combination of mentorship, legal advocacy, and support services designed to give young people in Pine Creek a safety net and a voice. As she spoke, she realized how far she'd come from the bitter, defeated person who had returned home 6 months earlier. And I'm pleased to announce, she said, reaching the most important part of her speech, that the program's first success story is here with us today. Ty Reynolds has completed his community service and counseling program, and this fall, he'll be attending state college on a full scholarship provided by the Wheeler Family Trust, which was established as part of the settlement of his case. From the side of the room, Ty stepped forward, looking almost unrecognizable in a button-up shirt and slacks, his face free from the fear and anger that had haunted him 6 months ago. The applause that greeted him was thunderous, led by Daniel and Sheriff Lawson from the stage. As Ty joined them, Lily stepped back from the microphone, her part done. She watched as her father shook Ty's hand, as Daniel placed a supportive hand on the boy's shoulder, as Mayor Johnson presented Ty with a certificate of achievement. This was what justice could look like when people cared more about doing right than saving face. After the ceremony, as people mingled and enjoyed refreshments, Daniel found Lily by the punch bowl. "That was quite a speech," he said. "The program is lucky to have you." Lily smiled. "I'm the lucky one. 6 months ago I thought my life was over. Now I feel like it's just beginning." "Any regrets?" Daniel asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. "About falsely accusing you of being a car thief?" Lily laughed. "Maybe 1 or 2. I was thinking more about staying in Pine Creek," Daniel clarified. "You could go back to the city, restart your journalism career with everything you've accomplished here." Lily considered this as she watched her father chatting with Ty across the room. The older man's face was animated as he listened to whatever the teenager was telling him, his pride evident even from a distance. "I think I'm where I need to be," she said finally. "There are important stories here that need telling and people who need someone to listen." Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed. Pine Creek is a better place because of you." "Because of us," Lily corrected him. "You didn't have to stick around after the Wheeler case was resolved. You could have handed things off to your assistant and moved on to bigger cases." "Maybe I found something worth staying for, too," Daniel said softly. As the evening progressed, Lily found herself surrounded by the community she'd once been so eager to escape. She watched her father laughing with his deputies, their relationship rebuilt on a foundation of accountability and shared purpose. She saw Ty talking earnestly with a group of younger teens already stepping into his role as a peer mentor, and she felt Daniel's steady presence beside her, a reminder that sometimes the wrong first impression could lead to the right new beginning. Pine Creek was far from perfect. The changes of the past 6 months were just the start of a longer journey. But as Lily looked around the community center, she felt something she hadn't expected to find when she'd returned home in defeat. Hope. Hope for this town, hope for the people in it, and hope for herself. Sometimes you had to get lost to find your way. Sometimes you had to come home to discover where you truly belonged. And sometimes, Lily thought as she caught Daniel's eye across the room, you had to blame the wrong person to find exactly the right one.